Hi everyone, I'm Manisha, the founder of Modulo, and today I want to share some of my favorite homeschooling books. If you're looking for a book to get oriented to homeschooling or just kind of figure out how to do it a little bit better, a little more easily, these are the books I most often recommend to families. Not all of them are specifically for homeschoolers or about homeschooling, but they really help a lot with the process. So, the first book that I'm going to recommend is called How to Talk So Kids Can Learn. This is part of the How to Talk to Kids series at home and at school. And this book is just really useful for reframing how we think about communicating with children. It just will give you some really useful strategies for understanding what is a child's need when you're having a conflict with them around learning, or just kind of to sense how they learn best, and just like very specific strategies to reframe a conflict or simply just communicate with them better so they learn. I recommend this book to almost every single one of our teachers when they're starting out, and it makes a world of difference. The transition that usually happens is someone who's kind of in the traditional instructional mode, this is what you need to do, to someone who is more in a receptive mode, really listening to what the child needs and then speaking to them in a way that's more supportive and helpful to working together to realize the shared goal of learning and loving learning. So this is not at all hippy dippy. It's a great book. It's very concrete. If you are just excited to learn how you can be a better educational guide for your child, or you're having some real struggles around learning, this book is just wonderful. All right, so the next book that I want to recommend is so helpful if you're thinking about this question around homeschooling and socialization. I really want to homeschool, but I'm worried about socialization. Is it going to be good for my family? And quite frankly, I had been working on homeschooling for almost 5 years, and I still had a lot of concerns about the socialization piece. And then I read this book. It is called Hold On to Your Kids by Dr. Gordon Neufeld and Dr. Gabor Mate. They talk about this transformation from a culture that just really came about in the 1950s, which is a culture that valued peer relationships rather than parent relationships, and this actually misguided idea that children learn to socialize by hanging out with their peers. So if you think about it, how do children learn math? Not from another child who doesn't really know math. They learn math from an older child or a teacher who has a better sense of math than them. In a similar way, it just makes more sense that children would learn social skills from a caring adult rather than picking them up from children. And a lot of the bullying that we're seeing at school is actually children who don't really know how to navigate social relationships, picking up bad habits from friends. Now, even more core to the book is this idea of family attachment. And when a child has a secure attachment with their primary caregiver, that provides a foundation that allows them to connect very well with other people in their life, whether that be children their own age, teachers, bosses, any kind of customer if they start their own business, romantic relationships. And the book was just absolutely transformational to me because it showed the power of that parent caregiver, primary caregiver child relationship, and how that, really nurturing that relationship, first of all, helps to build a cooperative relationship with your child where there's fewer struggles, but also really gives children the foundation to lead a socially, emotionally healthy life. And we see so much research now that when family attachments are strong, it leads to less addiction, it leads to less depression. And so when I read this book, what I realized is that children don't need to be in a classroom with 30 students the same age to build social skills. Actually, if they have that wonderful time with their family and they can nurture that connection, and it's not, okay, from 9 to 3 I'm at school, and from, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. when I go to dinner, I'm kind of in this frantic stress time with my parent. If we take that away and we just have a chill relationship where kids are engaging with their parents in daily life, sometimes doing their homework, sometimes hanging out with friends, and there's that continuity, those children are very confident. They're able to develop relationships easily. They have a lot of friends. And so when I read this book, I realized actually homeschooling is a better way to help develop social skills than sending your child to a traditional school. When children have that healthy foundation, when they have that really loving, caring, effective relationship with their parents, they are able to make lots of friends very easily and feel good and lead a happy life. And so this book, I feel like if you're on the fence about homeschooling or just getting started, just read it. It's fantastic, and it will really change your point of view. It's especially helpful just understanding the history of how we developed this idea that peer relationships were more important than parent relationships, and that's actually a false belief and not based on actually scientific research. Okay, so let's see now. The next book that I want to recommend to you is not a book. So when you're starting homeschooling or thinking about homeschooling, it can be really useful to just change your entire mindset, get a whole new framework when you're thinking about it. So a lot of people decide to start homeschooling because their children are having really severe problems in school, bullying. Maybe children have been diagnosed as having ADHD or on the autism spectrum, dyslexia, maybe there's some illness, and it's not pulling them out of schools is not a choice. In some cases, and more so, families are making a positive choice to homeschool, but often it's happening by default. And so what I want to recommend to you is this incredibly inspiring TED Talk that has convinced so many families to homeschool. And if you're getting just started and you kind of need some inspiration, I shared this with our graphic designer and he was so moved, he cried. And this, if you haven't watched this already, you have to watch it. It's a really quick video and it's called Do Schools Kill Creativity by Sir Ken Robinson. It is the most popular TED Talk of all times, and you will just leave that TED Talk with an entirely different view of school and what you can achieve in a homeschooling environment that you wouldn't be able to achieve in a typical school environment. It's all about how this institutionalized schooling, bunch of kids in the same class, having direct instruction, not having time to explore their interests, not having time to nurture their uniqueness, actually kills their creativity, their drive, their motivation. I mean, if you watch this video, you might just start homeschooling today. Now, this other book is also on the inspirational front. I think we have a tendency to look at children as beings we need to mold, not as beings that come into the world with this insane, innate drive to learn. And once we start seeing that incredible innate drive to learn, it really changes everything. We realize that if we let that natural energy explore all the different paths, if we let children follow their curiosity, if we stop being afraid, then perhaps they might learn a ton on their own. And the person who first got me thinking about this idea, because I was trained in a traditional way, I thought, okay, I'm the sculptor. As a teacher, I sculpt child's information that they have in their brain. I sculpt the way they learn. They need to learn these techniques from me. But when I saw Dr. Peter Gray speak, I completely changed my point of view, and I realized that children have this incredible natural energy and drive to learn. So the book that Peter Gray wrote, which influenced so many people, is called Free to Learn, and it is just, he talks a lot about evolutional biology and how we're biologically programmed to learn, how babies learn to speak naturally, and how when you think about free learning, free school, freedom to learn. It's just the idea that if you give this natural energy the attention it needs, if you nurture it, if you let children explore, if you don't try to control them, then they are going to learn a lot. And a lot of these things that they want to do naturally, like play with their friends, those are actually activities that are teaching them critical thinking skills, creativity, everything they need to thrive in this changing world. Now, I don't agree with every single thing that Peter Gray has written in this book. Is a little bit, things are different for different children. Some children do need more structure than others in order to thrive. And of course, our world has constraints that are imposed upon children. And so they are not naturally in a house completely free. And so even the environment we put them in is a form of control. So we have to understand that there's really no such thing as absolute freedom. Every child is different. But this book, and then there are certain subjects like reading. Some kids learn on their own naturally. Other kids do need direct instruction. If you just kind of throw your kid out there and don't help them at all, you might not get the results that you want. But that said, he does have some really, really good points, and we would all do well to give our children a lot more time to wander, to play, to direct their own learning in order to help them be happy, but also really reach their intellectual potential and become people who thrive as entrepreneurs, as engineers, as artists, as whatever they end up being. So that book, Free to Learn, is a really great book if you just kind of want to shake up your entire mindset about learning. I know Peter Gray really got me thinking differently about what education means, and it's an important and seminal work. Okay, now I have a few resources for those of you who might be a little bit more nerdy. The first one is just kind of an incredible article that you'll see maybe a lot of people, especially software engineers and tech entrepreneurs, talk about this a lot. It's Bloom's 2 Sigma problem. Benjamin Bloom was an educational researcher at MIT, and he published this study in 1984. And really no one has debunked it. And essentially what the study shows, the 2 Sigma problem shows that when you teach children one-on-one, it is about 90% more effective than teaching them in a group, even in a small group. And really it makes sense. I mean, when wealthy parents want to help their children learn better, they hire a tutor. They don't send them to a class. Of course, as soon as you're tutoring more than one child, that child is going to learn more, especially in a subject like mathematics. There are other subjects, obviously, like learning a foreign language or theater, that might benefit from a group environment where kids can kind of feed off of each other and collaborate. But especially with a subject like literacy or math, they learn so much more fast one-on-one. And the significance of this study is that many homeschoolers spend about 1 or 2 hours a day on direct instruction, learning math, learning English language arts, and the rest of the time they leave for mind wandering. And what happens is that these children go through the entire K through 8th grade math curriculum in 6 months, just because they're learning independently or with a parent at their own pace. And a lot of the work that's done in a classroom is really just managing behavior. And unfortunately, what happens in a group setting is that children are not really able to move forward at their pace. So maybe sometimes they're moving forward quickly and then they have to wait for everyone to catch up, and then another child, and then they're kind of slowed down, but the class is moving forward more quickly, so they miss some vital information along the way. It's like being on a train and then you miss a few tracks and you can't keep moving forward. And so this study is just really significant. We often refer to this as one-on-one mastery learning. We've written a lot about it at Modulo. And so there's 2 components here. First of all, to know you don't have to be teaching your kids in 6 hours a day like you do at school, because they're learning one-on-one, and that learning happens more quickly. When children have that ability to learn one-on-one, they are going to just move a lot faster. So education is more impactful in a homeschool setting, especially when that one-on-one learning is happening when they're most wide awake and fresh, as opposed to homework at the end of the day when they're exhausted. And then the other thing to know is that you're qualified to teach your children. Just the fact that you're one-on-one differentiating learning, you're going to be so much more effective than a classroom teacher, than the most trained classroom teacher in the world who has to differentiate learning for 30 kids. And then, of course, what teacher knows your child better than you and can curate the education for their needs? So that study, the 2 Sigma problem, is really foundational to homeschooling and why it works from the learning perspective, from picking up those core skills. And I'll just add one other aspect to this. Some parents might listen to what I'm saying and say, hey, during COVID, I tried to help my kid with homework and they would not listen to me and it did not go well. It was a disaster. But what you're missing when you're helping with homework is context. So the problem is that a lot of classroom learning is about teaching specific procedures. And you as the parent were not in the classroom when the child was learning those procedures. You're not trained in those specific procedures. Those procedures are simply tools to help learn concepts. They're not what the children need to learn in and of itself. But when you're homeschooling, you have an independent curriculum that is designed specifically for learning at home. You have all the context that you need. You're not left out of anything. There's not that moment of like, Mom, that's not what my teacher said. You don't know anything. So that is just a whole different situation. You could think of it as, hey, you just watched a documentary together and you're discussing it. Why would your child get in a fight about that? You have the full context. And so if you haven't experienced working through a homeschool curriculum with your child as opposed to helping them with homework, I would really try it before you knock it. So just remember, one-on-one mastery learning and Bloom's 2 Sigma problem provides just incredible evidence that children who learn one-on-one through homeschooling are going to learn much, much faster. I will just also add to that, this is not necessarily in Bloom's 2 Sigma problem, but when people learn that one-on-one learning is so effective, they can be tempted sometimes to get 6 or 7 hours of tutoring a day. And that doesn't actually work very well because it's really about focus time. The human brain cannot be involved in this really intense focused activity like learning math for 6 hours at a time. It really works best if students can concentrate for the amount of time that works for them. For younger, lower elementary, that can be around 45 minutes. For older kids, it can be 1 or 2 hours. It really varies per person. But then they do need that time for their mind to wander and ideas to marinate. Otherwise, they're just going to get burnt out and none of the time is going to be effective. So I think you can really feel confident that doing this 1 or 2 hours a day is going to be the best way for your child to learn, and doing it for more hours will make the learning less effective than if you were doing it for 1 or 2 hours a day, if that makes sense. All right, so moving right along to best books about homeschooling, I have another one for the nerds among you. There's a very short essay called The Deschooling Society by Ivan Illich. This is a super, super nerdy one. Ivan Illich was an Austrian priest, and he wrote this manifesto about the education system and how it didn't work. Education system, when it came in, was incredible. People who never had access to education before had access to education, and it was only the elite that learned how to read and write. But now the problem is we're stuck in this very institutional one-size-fits-all system, and Ivan Illich kind of prophesied this new type of education system that would be based on learning webs. And we're already seeing that with different marketplaces for people to find tutors and classes and independent people starting micro schools and learning apps. And then Ivan Illich even talks about skill sharing, and which is one of the most fun parts of homeschooling communities, is parents who are sharing skills with each other, even sharing childcare, the science professor who offers a science class for all the kids in the community, the dad who offers a weaving class for his daughter and other children. So this is Ivan Illich's essay is just a really incredible dive into what a future education system would look like that already stays true to this day. It's totally free essay, and that you can read it online. So he actually talks about 4 learning networks. One is educational objects. So you can think about that as some of the curriculum that homeschooling families are developing, or a site like Teachers Pay Teachers, where teachers write curriculum and sell it. Skills exchange. This is something where one mom teaches math to someone else's son, and another dad teaches singing to her daughter, or just people in the community are doing internships and apprenticeships, peer matching. This is something where people might swap skills, and then potentially even a tutoring marketplace. And then that would be the directory of professional educators who are offering their skills. So this is a really incredible essay and very foundational. Now, just if you want to kind of have an overview of homeschooling, how to make it creative, fun, vibrant, I would definitely recommend the best-selling book by Julie Bogart, The Brave Learner. If that sounds familiar to you, you might actually be familiar with Julie Bogart's curriculum, Brave Writer. And Julie just has a totally different approach to education that starts with joy and thinking about what kind of activities do your children love and how can you curate learning around that. How to create the best environment for learning, how to support yourself. It's just a really wonderful overview that's very accessible to every learner. And I do recommend her writing curriculum as well. It just takes a totally different approach to writing, more around communication and creativity and fostering a love of learning. So Julie is amazing, and this is a beautiful book. We've also interviewed her on the podcast, and it was one of my mom's favorite interviews, so definitely check that one out. Now, last but not least, I'll just do a shameless plug. We've also written a free guide to homeschooling here at Modulo, and I've tried to incorporate every single thing you could ever ask about homeschooling. We start with a basic intro about homeschooling, modular learning, how we define that a little bit differently than just school at home, pros and cons to homeschooling, statistics about homeschooling if you're looking for research to prove that this is really the best way for your children to learn. One-on-one mastery learning. We talked about Benjamin Bloom's 2 Sigma problem and how that's really a core argument to why the education piece works better in homeschooling. We talk about family involvement in education, self-directed learning, cognitive diversity. If your child has special needs, in this guide we talk about 9 different learning profiles, how to diagnose them, what might be some signs that your child has that special need, what type of curriculum they might use. This is our huge homeschool curriculum guide. Finding the best curriculum is absolutely so crucial for the homeschooling to be effective, so that guide is super supportive. All the key topics: socialization, childcare, how to find outside teachers, classes, homeschool co-ops, how to track your child's learning, all the different approaches to setting up a schedule, how to afford homeschooling, lots of great free resources there, how to set up your online environment or your child's desk. And then if that's overwhelming, there's just a super quick guide of some very simple steps. We have the longer version and the shorter version. If you just want to say, I'm totally overwhelmed, just tell me what to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there you go. And then we have 2 interviews with some really inspiring homeschoolers. Nirayal, who's a best-selling author and tech entrepreneur who writes a lot about productivity, who's just has homeschooled a wonderful, wonderful daughter. And then Rachel Thomas, who's also a homeschooling mom with Modulo, named one of the top women in AI in the world, and has some really great thoughts on navigating screen time, finding tutors, and just, again, homeschooling because of a love of learning. These are both 2 people who never expected they would homeschool and have had a great time doing it. There's so many more amazing books and essays and YouTube videos about homeschooling that I couldn't include here, but these are really the ones that I mostly recommend to every parent. And whether you're wondering about socialization or how to talk to your kids or just how to get started or need a little inspiration, I think, or you're one of those deep educational philosophers, I think that you will definitely find something great within these recommendations. If you have another homeschooling book you love, please mention it in the comments so other people can benefit. And if you have any questions about homeschooling, visit www.modulo.app to talk to our AI learning concierge. We have child life specialists who read every single question to make sure that a human will reply to you if the AI doesn't get it right. And then we also have a free curriculum finder on Modulo, and that can help you identify the best curriculum for your child based on their unique learning archetype. I hope that this video has been helpful. I'm excited to hear what you think about the books. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments and we'll definitely reply. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day, everyone.